Hello, happy Sunday and happy Pride. Here we are. And I am Linda Douglas. I'm a member of Women for Biden-Harris, and I'm your moderator for the afternoon. And our topic, as you know, is Reclaiming Choice, Generational Journeys of Reproductive Rights. And what a journey it has been and is now. A very perilous one is all I can say. So first, I want to thank our co-hosts. We have the Chester County Marching Forward, Young Women for US, Students for Biden-Harris, and the Women of Color Coalition. And we want to give a very special thanks to our friends and collaborators, very important participants in this event. John Bauman, Vice Chair of the DNC Seniors Council, Mona Cohen, Betsy Feiback, and Brad Kirsch, co-chairs of the Pennsylvania Democratic Senior Leadership Council, Linda Plotkin, she's the chair of the Florida Senior Council, and Donna West, who is the chair of the Nevada Senior Council. And so for those of you who are new to our group, I want to give you just a little bit of background about who Women for Biden-Harris, who we are. So we started in 2020 during the pandemic, started by Jill Nash, who's unfortunately not able to be with us today, but a fabulous leader. And what we wanted to do was try to do the work that's essential to a campaign by grassroots volunteers that is normally done in person, except we wanted to do it online. So we put together a group that did basically phone banking, we did activation, we did all the get out the vote activities online, and we wound up with 750,000 followers and growing, we certainly hope. Please keep recruiting wherever you can. And it turned out that the Women for Biden-Harris Coalition was the largest one in the Biden campaign, the largest volunteer group that we had together. Now we've branched off into state races, senators, assembly races, and so forth. And this year we are going to have in-person events as well as all of the many online things that we've been doing. So of course we all know that the stakes this year are beyond, they're almost indescribably high. And in every possible way, but certainly they are almost not an exaggeration to say they are existential for women this year, as reproductive rights, a right we have had for 50 years, is being ripped away state by state. So today we have the great fortune of being joined by three women who are going to take us through this generational journey. What life was like before the Supreme Court legalized abortion in 1973 with Roe versus Wade, what is happening to medical care for women now and since the Dobbs decision eliminated the right to reproductive freedom and the right to have an abortion regardless of the circumstances, and what is in particular happening to Black women who already face disparities in maternal care. And we're going to talk about where we are today and what the future might look like if Joe Biden is not reelected, which is just an unbearable thought. And excuse my cat, I'm going to try to keep him from falling into the picture here. So first I want to introduce Heather Booth. Heather has been a, pardon me, get off the, okay, here's the cat and she's going. Sorry, hope she doesn't jump up here again. Heather Booth has been a leader in the effort to secure and protect reproductive rights for decades. She is a true hero. She founded the Jane Collective in the 1960s before abortion was legal, and she's been an important advocate, activist, and organizer ever since. So Heather, I want to start, first of all, I'm going to ask each of you to say a little something at the beginning. Heather, I want to ask you, you fought for women when abortion was illegal, and you are still fighting for them now, as abortion is at risk of being illegal throughout the country, once again, 50 years later. So what is the message that you want all of us to take to heart, Heather?
If we organize, we can change this world. And you know this because you are the organizers, you're the people who do the work. So I come on this call to thank you for what you've done and what you will do and what we'll do together. Because right now in this country, we are on this knife's edge, a knife's edge between freedom on the one hand and an unhinged, authoritarian, hateful, even violent rule. But we have the chance of even greater freedom, freedom to vote, freedom to thrive, and reproductive freedom, which is the most intimate decision in a person's life about when or whether or with whom we have a child. And no politician should interfere with that decision. And you are amongst the most important people in the country because you are carrying on this fight between freedom and hateful chaos. And together, when we organize, that's when we'll win.
Very inspiring, and thank you very much. And now I want to go to Dr. Karen Feisullin. She is an OBGYN in Pennsylvania. That is a state where abortion is still legal. And in addition to caring for pregnant patients, she also teaches the abortion procedure. And by the way, this is such an essential a piece of knowledge for anybody who goes into the specialty of taking care of pregnant people. So that is something that Karen teaches, and she's a strong advocate for women to have access to the procedure. So what are you seeing now, Dr. Feisullin, around the country, and what are the medical stakes for women in this country?
They're unbelievably high. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As you said, I'm an OBGYN in Pennsylvania. For the past 2 years, we've been very lucky in this state because we didn't have a law that automatically reversed the right to have an abortion like many other states have, and other states are still continuing to turn that protection around. So the things that we're seeing now, and the stakes are unbelievably high, and we see it all the time. If you pay attention to what's going on in the news, patients are getting turned away who are bleeding, who are infected, who, if the fetuses still have a heartbeat, or they're just sent home and, told to just wait for their miscarriages to pass, or they're not getting the care that they need to end a pregnancy that they would like to end because it's not the right time for them, or for whatever reason, they're choosing to end a pregnancy. There's so many scenarios, and there's so many nuances to why someone ends a pregnancy. And just passing this blanket law is just, it's bad for half the population. It puts patients at risk. We're already seeing patients suffering and, needing emergency medical care. And it's going to get worse if Trump is elected and he passes this promised national abortion ban.
Yeah, so scary for any woman of childbearing age, and any woman who has a daughter of childbearing age or a granddaughter. I mean, it's terrifying. So Assemblywoman Daniele Monroe-Moreno is in the Nevada State Assembly, and she is also the first Black chair of the Nevada State Democratic Party, which, by the way, is one of the most state Democratic parties in the country, one of the most important state Democratic parties in the country in this election. So one of the things I know you have focused on, Assemblywoman, is in fact the issue of maternal and child care. That's one of your focuses as an elected official. So what are the stakes for Black women in particular if we don't succeed in our fight to reclaim choice?
Well, thank you so much for having me and for having this conversation. And you've heard it from the other two speakers. The issues that affect women in general affect Black women even more. Black women live in communities where they oftentimes don't have healthcare or quality healthcare, not to even mention reproductive care. So to be super short, if we are not successful in reclaiming choice, we will be losing even more Black mamas in this world. There'll be more Black women who will die because they do not have access to quality health care and reproductive health care. That's just the short of it.
Well, we want to dig into that further when we talk to you, but we're going to start because we are going to go through the kind of the time calendar a little bit of reproductive rights and their availability. So Heather, start us off back to a time in the past that could resemble a time in the future. and that is when it was completely illegal throughout the country to get an abortion. What did you do, and why did you do it?
In some ways, my origins were in the civil rights movement. In 1964, some of you may remember Freedom Summer. It was a project where Northern students were recruited to go south to Mississippi to help courageous African Americans who were living in terror. And even tragically during that summer, 3 of the young volunteers were killed at the hands of the Klan. But because people organized, within a year, we won a Voting Rights Act. And I learned that we may take risks, but when we organize, we change the world. I came back to my campus in Chicago in 1965, and a friend of mine told me that his sister was pregnant, and could I help them find someone to provide an abortion? I hadn't really thought about the issue before. It was a much more innocent time, and I may have been a more innocent person. It was also a time when 3 people talking about abortion was a conspiracy to commit a felony. I didn't know quite what to do, but I went to the medical arm of the civil rights movement. So one movement helps another, and I found an extraordinary doctor, T.R.M. Howard. He performed the abortion. It was successful, and I thought that was it. But word spread, and someone else called. I made that arrangement, then word spread, and someone else called. And I realized that the need was so great, I had to set up a system. Because it was illegal, we called the system Jane and would post signs saying, pregnant, don't want to be, call Jane. Over time, I recruited other women to be part of it because the need was so great. And then over time, the women learned how to do the procedures themselves. And between 1969 and 1973, the women of Jane themselves performed 11,000 abortions.
Wow.
And because people organized, we were able to win Roe and this right. And we can codify this right if we have the trifecta with President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, a Senate, and a House. And that's the work that you do every day.
What was it like for women who desperately wanted and needed an abortion in those days? What did they have to go through? Who was doing anything other than your group? I mean, what were they facing?
Well, as the doctor mentioned before Roe, there were septic abortion wards in many of the hospitals in Chicago because women became infected when they either tried to perform an abortion on themselves, some throwing themselves downstairs. There were stories of people drinking lye, using coat hangers, or because of what people did to them. In many places, the mob was controlling the procedures, not really caring about the women. But over 70% of the population now believes that abortion should be legal in all or most cases because it is such a need and a part of women's health. And you make the difference. So we don't go back to those dangerous old days, but we go forward to even greater freedom.
So it was illegal, and you had people who were not trained doctors doing this illegal procedure, where I assume if you wanted an abortion, your doctor would just say no to you, or some other man would say no to you, because all the men were doctors in those days. I mean, all the doctors were men in those days, and everybody who had control over your life as a woman, was telling you that you just had to go ahead and have the baby, or go ahead and suffer, a medical emergency potentially. But you who stepped in, you and your group, what kind of a risk were you taking? And I mean, this is a risk that could exist in a future America if Donald Trump is elected.
Even out of the civil rights movement, there were some times where people would say to each other, are you willing to die for freedom? I very much wanted to live, but I was willing to take the risk to live my values. But now I think it's different. The question is, will we live for freedom? Will we do the work every day? Make those calls, do the postcards, have the house parties, exactly what Women for Biden-Harris does. And so together we can face those risks, live our values, and change the world.
So thank you so much, Heather. And we're going to come back to you later in the program, but I want to go to Dr. Feisullin, who's on the front lines right now as a physician. What are you seeing, both for the rollback of abortion? I mean, what are you seeing in terms of Dobbs, the rollback of abortion rights, both for pregnant people and also for the medical profession? What are you seeing?
First of all, I just want to thank Heather for everything she's done. I was getting very emotional while you were speaking, and I just can't imagine living during that time and just not even knowing where to turn. So thank you to you and everyone that you brought into your fold. So it was a very uncertain time in June 2022 when we knew it was probably going to be decided, in Dobbs, the favor of in favor of Dobbs, in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, and that Roe was going to be overturned. We heard the leak come, shortly before, and we were worried. We didn't know what was going to happen. Pennsylvania has, you may have heard the term trigger law in the papers when Roe was overturned, and that means that there was a law in place in certain states that if Roe was ever overturned as a national protection for abortion, the state, and it became the states' rights, it immediately became illegal in those states to perform an abortion. So there were actually patients waiting at their doctor's office to have their abortion that day, and they had no idea what was happening, which is so upsetting and hard to imagine. So in terms of what we're seeing, as I mentioned, we really didn't have a big change in our practice here, but in other states, we have states around us that still provide abortion. We have New York, we have New Jersey, Delaware. On the eastern side of the state, on the western side of the state, they saw a large increase in patients coming from other states seeking care, so much so that sometimes those providers couldn't see patients from Pennsylvania because they were seeing patients from other states. So, there was a big, call for help, and, other doctors going out to help out, in parts of the state that saw they were really overwhelmed by the influx of patients.
And what kind of cases are we talking about?
How many?
No, what kinds of cases?
Oh, abortion cases.
But
Like
I mean,
patients.
what's going on with these women? I mean, I can only imagine how desperate they are.
Oh yeah. And I mean, there's so many facets to this. Like, so if somebody has to travel for an abortion, they have to take time off from work. It's going to be more expensive if it's later in pregnancy that you're able to make these arrangements. Because if it's not legal in your state, you might think, okay, well, I can't do it. But then you may hear that, oh, you can get it in Pennsylvania. So, it prolongs it. It puts someone later in their pregnancy where it could be more expensive. Abortion is very safe and very low risk, but it does have more risks of like bleeding and potentially maybe infection the farther you go into pregnancy. So still safer than carrying a pregnancy to term, but still, like, the risks do go up. And most abortions in the United States are performed within the first 12 weeks. So just on that note, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing patients who are coming and they were, maybe farther along in their pregnancy. And that also happened in Texas during the pandemic. Like,
Right.
Texas shut its services down and, wasn't considered essential health care, all through the pandemic, especially the first year. But what we're seeing now is, I have these very brave colleagues in states where abortion is no longer readily accessible, and they're still fighting for their patients. They're making arrangements or giving them information on how they can make arrangements to travel to other states. But lawmakers are looking at making that illegal, providing patients information where they can get their care. They're trying to go for the patient themselves. I mean, you may have heard about the bounty hunter law in Texas, where anybody who's involved with helping a patient get an abortion is fined $10,000, and anybody can turn them in. So it could be the sister, the partner, the Uber driver, like anybody can and they can, like, one patient can have multiple, you know, people who assisted them get, you know, fined.
Well,
For
and
having this.
there's another growing risk added to what you're just talking about. So these are doctors being prosecuted. These are, you know, patients whose health is imperiled by waiting, depending on what's happened to them. But there's also a case before the United States Supreme Court right now that they'll be deciding very soon, that will take away from women who are having a pregnancy, you know, some kind of severe complication. It will take away their right to be treated in an emergency room. If they come into right now there's a federal right. If you go into an emergency room
Yeah.
and you're having an emergency medical situation, the
EMTALA, yeah.
emergency room is obligated to stabilize you.
Right.
And there's a lot of concern and fear that the Supreme Court might in fact take away this right for a woman to go to an emergency room and get emergency care that includes abortion. What would that do? What happens there? I mean, what kinds of cases are we talking about here?
It's unimaginable. I mean, as it is now, there are a lot of doctors who are afraid to treat patients who have a miscarriage in progress if there's still a heartbeat. But you know, the lawmakers will come back and say, "Oh no, we didn't mean that." You know, you figure out the law, but if you figure it out incorrectly, you could wind up in prison or, you know, $100,000 fine. You know, so it really, you know, it's moral injury for the physicians who are trying to provide care. But, you know, more importantly, our patients are suffering. They're going home, they're bleeding, they're coming back, requiring a blood transfusion. And it's unimaginable what is happening. And we see it every day. You know, IVF is now, you know, 13 states have now put proposed bills to have the fetus have personhood. You know, somebody made 13 embryos, and they had 2 or 3 kids. Like, what do you do with the rest of them? Are you going to go to jail if, you know, somehow if they don't get adopted, or, you know, whatever they want us to do with it after the fact? And then there's also, you know, the right to contraception. Yeah, I know you're asking me very specifically about abortion care, but like, it's really like, it's snowballing, you know,
Yeah.
every time we turn around, there's like another right that's being compromised. And, it's unbelievable. Like, now someone can't even go to the emergency room and you know, expect to be cared for if they're having some kind of complication. You know, if you are like, you know, 20 weeks pregnant and you come and your blood pressure is 200 over 120, like, you know, the baby's not going to survive at that age. But is mom going to die if she continues this pregnancy? Like, how do you make a decision like that?
Let me ask you one final question and then we're going to move on a little bit. We'll bring you back in. But what is going to potentially happen here to your specialty, which involves maternal care? So OBGYNs take care of you during your pregnancy to make sure that you and your baby are healthy. So now we're not talking about abortion. We're just talking about the field of maternal care, because I have read that residents in OBGYN are no longer applying to work in states that have full bans on abortion. So is it likely that doctors, as these bans spread, that people going to medical school are going to avoid that specialty because it's too perilous?
Yeah, and that, we're already seeing that. Medical students, applications to states that have complete bans have gone down. I think this past year was 4%, but like 4% can be huge. It may not sound like a lot, but you know, there are maternity deserts all over the United States. Maternity deserts are like counties where people have to drive more than an hour and a half to seek, or maybe 2 hours to get prenatal care. And so if you have fewer residents, and maybe they want to provide abortion, maybe they want to learn how to you know, learn the full scope of OBGYN care, but maybe they are emergency room doctors, maybe they want to have a family themselves in the future. Like, doctors are leaving states. Like Idaho is a perfect example. They have a huge maternity desert. Doctors are leaving the state, you know, in droves, and they have very few doctors who provide maternal care at this point. So it's a very scary prospect.
And so that imperils the very child that the pro so-called pro-life people say they care about, is to start to shrink the profession that takes care of mothers and babies. So, so Assemblywoman Monroe-Moreno, let me come to you now. Talk a little bit about the existing disparities for Black women. Anyway, I mean, there is not all of our audience may be as familiar with this. I mean, there is a, disgraceful disparities around the country for care for Black women and their babies, and exacerbated now by the ban on abortion in different states. What is the issue there? What are you seeing and what are you aware of?
So being a Black woman who's a mother and a grandmother, and listening to conversations with Black mamas, Black women's voices, unfortunately, aren't listened to in a lot of medical settings. We go into the doctor's office, and for some reason, there's a misconceived notion that Black women can take more pain. So sometimes when we say this is happening, they're not heard. And it doesn't really matter the economic level of that Black woman. The voices just are not being heard. But in America in general, we're losing mamas at higher rates being a developed nation than other countries. I believe, and the doctor can let me know if my numbers are right, about in 100,000 births, we lose about 20.1 patients, but for Black women, it's double that amount.
Wow.
And when the doctor talked about our maternal deserts, for medical deserts, a lot of those deserts are in rural communities and Black and brown communities. So in comparison to our white sisters, Black women oftentimes live in communities where have jobs where they're uninsured. They're low-wage jobs, so they don't have insurance. They face financial barriers that in accessing childcare, if they have to drive 25 miles to get to the doctor and take time off work, and they may have other children that to find childcare for, and right now childcare costs almost as much as it does to send your kid to college, they may not be able to access that childcare. They fall in that coverage gap when you think about insurance, but also in comparison to our white peers, Black women are less likely to have access to the prenatal care because of those healthcare deserts. And that can lead to higher rates for preterm births, for low birth weights for those babies who make it to the full term. But more importantly, it increases the rates of mortality for the mamas and babies. It's sad that that's where we're at right now. But if we take away that choice, that opportunity that women have to decide if they want to have a family, when you think about becoming a mom, that is the single most or the largest economic decision a woman will ever make in her lifetime, to have that baby or not have that baby. And we're taking away that choice from her, and a choice that should just be hers, her doctor's, and her family's choice. It will mean that we're going to lose even more Black mamas who are already dying at twice the rate of our white counterparts in our country.
Which is just, unacceptable and unjust in so many ways.
I just
let
add,
me
the
ask you-
statistic is actually like 3 times. The maternal mortality rate for Black women is 3 times higher than for white women, is
Wow.
what
Oh my God.
we're learning. And there,
Well, that's outrageous.
the reason why is there's like beyond like the hour that we have here, but it's a really important thing for people to know.
So, well, thank you for adding that even more horrifying statistic to this conversation. So, let me ask you, Assemblywoman, one more question before we try to have a little short group discussion and then maybe take some questions. So, you are also the chair of the Nevada Democratic Party, in addition to serving as an elected official in a senior position in the assembly in Nevada, one of the most important states in this election, because we know that the election is going to be decided more than any place else by all the swing states in the country, and yours certainly falls into that category. So right now, abortion is legal in Nevada, but what do you see happening in a state like Nevada if Nevada votes for Trump? So, right now you've got your politics in your state, but maybe your politics are changing, and maybe the management of your politics is changing, and maybe officials who don't agree with Donald Trump start to lose their power. I mean, what do you see? I mean, realistically, potentially could happen in your state.
Well, realistically, back in 1990, the voters in Nevada, we codified abortion, and we voted for it. 4 in 5 voters in the state of Nevada still feel that a woman has the right to choose what she does with her body. We do have a ballot initiative to move forward on the November ballot, but when you talk to voters in Nevada, and it doesn't matter if they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, by far and large, 4 in 5 voters still say that a woman has a right to choose what she does with her body. Right now, we're an island. Nevada is an island surrounded by states where abortion rights have been taken away or very much limited. We're seeing an influx of women coming to Nevada to utilize the services that we have in our state, and it's limited, but we've gone out of our way, and we had Republicans who voted with us, very few, to make sure that not only the mama and her families are protected, but the doctors providing those services are protected as well. I, as a state party chair, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that Donald Trump does not get back into the White House, because when a person shows you who they are, we need to believe them. Yeah. And he can say that he's not going to do an abortion ban, a national abortion ban, but that's just talk. And we know that his conversation matches whatever group he's talking to that day. But we've seen his actions, and we've seen the actions of those other elected officials who were following along with him. And we saw who he put in office for judges at the district level and in the Supreme Court. They have a long game that they've been playing to take away our rights. So in the state of Nevada, we're a purple state about a lot of things. But when it comes to reproductive health care in this state, we know that it's important. It's right up there with our economy to make sure that this state may be purple, but a woman's right to choose is one of the key things in every demographic of the state. I don't want to think about what would happen if Trump was back in office, because we all lose. He has lost in this state twice. He's going to lose again a third time in this state, if for no other reason, to make sure that we do protect our rights as women.
But you made the really important point that, it's very possible that we could have a national abortion plan passed by, Donald Trump, a Republican Congress, a right-wing Supreme Court. I mean, it just, the prospect is, even for a state like Nevada, terrifying. So let me just try to ask each of you a quick wrap-up question here. Heather, abortion matters, certainly to women. I mean, there's a lot of support for abortion, as you were mentioning, but it's not as high a priority as it should be. What can be done? What can we do to make it a higher priority for voters who are voting Democratic and even Republican, because there are Republican women out there too? What can we do to make this a higher priority than it is right now in the polls?
In part, it's what Women for Biden-Harris are doing every day. It's what the doctor and the chair are doing in their areas. I sometimes encourage people to think about 4 M's. 4, the letter M. The first M is members. We can recruit people for the next call. You've now got 750,000 members. Write down right now, who are the 3 or 5 or even more people? Who would you contact? How will you recruit them? How will you get them involved intergenerationally? Maybe it's your children, maybe it's your grandchildren, maybe it's your parents, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's someone you met in a congregation. Who will you recruit? The second is message. Here, people have talked about what our message is, this most intimate freedom in a person's life. How will we send out that message? Will it be in social media, letters to the editor, the postcarding you do? Will it be in house parties you hold where you can have discussions? And we'll hear more about that later. The third is money. Often we're asked to give money, but I'm going to suggest we ask others to give money. We recruit those funding, that funding. And the fourth is movement. We show up. This summer is going to be a freedom reproductive summer. And we can make that happen. Women for Biden-Harris already has plans for it. I thank the doctor. I thank the chair. I thank you, Linda. And I thank Women for Biden-Harris for changing the future.
That is what we call a call to action, which really is, essential to what we do. And so let me go ahead and ask you, Dr. Feisullin, what is, if you can kind of summarize this quickly, what is the medical message? Because I actually think that the loss of physicians who are going to take care of you when you want to have a healthy baby is a very important part of the message. But what can your profession, what can doctors do? What can the AMA do? What can doctors do here to try to stop this, the danger? You told me when we were talking that it's going to be dangerous to be a woman. That's a very important line, I think. So what can your profession do here to help?
So what we're doing now is I'm involved with a group of doctors in different specialties. There's some OBGYNs, there's rheumatologist, emergency room doctor, critical care, infectious disease. And we got together before the 2022 gubernatorial election to help with the Democratic candidates, help get Governor Shapiro in office. And we did press conferences and we did town halls and we did things that doctors don't usually do. And the press paid attention. They said, wow, doctors aren't usually this politically involved. We got a lot of airway, we got a lot of attention, and I like to believe that we made a difference. And I think even more doctors are realizing, like our learners, our medical students, our residents are seeing that like one of the things for me is that it made me feel less powerless. Like just having all these decisions made to me, things I want to do to help my patients, I can't do because you don't understand what it means to take care of a patient who's going through this. Like, no, that's not okay. So, it helped me feel less powerless. And I think that conveying that message to other, care providers is really important. But like on another level, just, if you're not in the medical profession, talk to people. The knowledge gap is huge. Just when I told the story earlier about when Dobbs, was passed and patients showed up the next day for their abortion because they had no idea that their state, banned it. Like people just don't know. And, pointing it out, especially if you're reading like, TikTok all day, like you may not know exactly what's happening. So like have a conversation. If you know your facts, you are like angry and frustrated and you want things to change, talk to your family, talk to your friends. Like they may not know all the details. And that's one of the single most important things that you could do. You have 5 months, talk to as many people as you can. You don't have to fight with them. Just tell them the facts and say, look, this is why this is important. Like you can have your beliefs and I respect that. But like you have to understand that, this is what people are going through and they're suffering and it's wrong. It's not the right thing to do.
Well, that is also a really important call to action. So thank you for that. And then finally, Assemblywoman Monroe-Moreno. You've got a lot of M's in your last name. I'm going to call you M squared from now on. But your call to action, I'd like to start it off with a question, which is it kind of like the question I asked Heather. There are so many crucial issues facing Black voters. I mean, there is the economy, there is jobs, there is rampant discrimination, there is the collapsing educational system in so many parts of the country. How do you make this issue a priority for Black voters?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked me that, because when you talk about becoming a mom, a parent, it attaches to every other issue you just mentioned. When you talk about the economy, becoming a parent is one of the most, probably the greatest economic decision you'll ever make in your lifetime. When you think about housing and you're like, well, I need a house that fits my family. Well, that goes right back to, did you even have a choice to have that family? Was that a decision that you were able to make? When you talk about your voting rights, there were people who died to make sure that we were able as Black people to vote. And there was Black women on the lines making those decisions and at that fight. Reproductive rights is part of every decision that we make. It's tied to every decision that we make. When you talk about healthcare, and I think when you talk to the Black community, it's more having a discussion about quality, affordable healthcare. And reproductive care is part of that healthcare. And without that, we've talked about what the numbers are of Black mamas who are dying already. And then you talk about the rights that are being taken away. If the GOP is successful in taking away our rights to make our choices of what we do with our bodies, what other rights that Black people have fought for years are going to be taken away? So it's not just talking about abortion care, but it's making sure that people know that abortion care is one of those rights that for centuries our ancestors have fought for to get us to where we are. And if they're allowed to take away this right, there will be so many more rights that will come right along with it. And in doing that, telling the story of where we are as far as our healthcare right now, and that the healthcare is disproportionate along with those other things, but it's tied to their economic status. Where you are when you talk about education and housing, it all comes together. It's one package, and you can't fix one without the other. And if we lose this right, then we're in fear of losing the others.
Wow. That is a very, very powerful point. And I hope that we're all going to be making that point when we are talking to everybody that we can be talking to. So we have a few questions from the audience that I'd like to go ahead and ask you. And I think one of them is particularly interesting as we think about the pledge that doctors have, to do no harm. So we're wondering, our audience members wondering, what does the AMA have to say about legislation that is essentially interfering with a physician's right to stay true to his or her oath?
Well, I can speak for ACOG, which is the American College of OBGYN. That's really our governing body. And every step of the way we've been supported. ACOG doesn't support, abortion restrictions. It doesn't support residents not being trained. There's American College of Graduate Medical Education that oversees our residents training. And, part of your training is to be trained to perform an abortion, because abortions are done for miscarriages. Abortions are done for, live pregnancies. Like they're just part of healthcare. And so for residents to be able to graduate, they have to be familiar with the procedure. So these states with bans have less access. So that's been a sticking point. There's no answer yet, but they are speaking up against it. The Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, they diagnose a lot of the high-risk pregnancies and the, if there's any fetal anomalies, like there's any defects in the pregnancy itself. If the mom is sick, like they take care of those patients, and it affects so many different areas. So definitely they're supportive of us. They're speaking out, but it's not, it hasn't translated into making this care legal. And, you know, this care also extends to like other specialties as well, like emergency medicine. Patients come into the emergency room because they're bleeding or they, you know, think they're pregnant and they're like, you know, sick or whatever. And some doctors are afraid to treat them because, you know, what if they have to make this decision to or have to make the diagnosis that's going to lead to a decision that winds up putting their livelihood at risk. And again, the moral injury, it's not just about the risk to us, you know, no, we certainly don't want to go to prison or be fined, but like we have to send this patient away and we need to do, we know we can do better.
Really an attempt to overturn science itself.
Yeah.
And to substitute politician decisions as opposed to scientific decisions. There's even another case at the Supreme Court that's questioning whether a pill that's an abortion pill, mifepristone, can be sold, even though it is safer than Viagra, it is safer than Tylenol. It's been on the market for 20 years, but a judge in Texas is challenging that because they want politicians to make these decisions rather than doctors, rather than scientists, rather than what's really good for the American people.
Well, that's you made two very important points there, Heather. So number one, this is more of an expansion of the anti-science approach of the MAGA Republicans. I mean, in every way, whether it's vaccines, whether it's climate change, whether it is, you know, what is you know, essential for the healthcare of women. So that is a very, very, very powerful point. And, you know, also the second point you made is that the second very consequential case before the United States Supreme Court is one that could potentially, court watchers think there's less likelihood of this one than the emergency room ruling, but it could potentially make it much more difficult or even impossible to get the abortion pill, which is what many women now are turning to for their own medical care. And by the way, you know, that is a process in which you would like to be able to be in touch with the doctor when you're doing that, just in case, you know. And so the idea that you're going to, you know, be forced to try to bootleg it somehow from China, you don't really know if it's the right pill or not, and what are the medical consequences. I mean, it really is, that is more than anything else in many ways what starts to push women back into back alley abortions again, you know, with coat hangers and the mafia and all the horribles that you mentioned to us.
The irony of access, as one thing, the irony of the access to abortion pills in this country being restricted is that we used to help people in Mexico be able to access abortion pills when it was illegal there, and now it's legal there, and now they're helping us.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like what happened to the United States doesn't make any sense.
And one final question I have a question from the audience, but I'm just going to ask, I want to ask the Assemblywoman a quick question. In terms of trying to make sure that we are messaging this correctly out in the, you know, our group is, I mean, what do you think we should be saying on behalf of the women of Nevada and especially the women of color in Nevada?
Well, I think a lot of it is as coming off a defense and being on the offense. A lot of what I've heard is that women use abortion just as birth control, not understanding that, as the doctor said, there's so many reasons why a woman has to have an abortion. I have 3 daughters, and between each pregnancy, I lost a child and had to have a D&C. But we're living in a time where that D&C that was used to save my life, a doctor may be scared to do because they would say it's an abortion. Taking away that narrative that people just use it as birth control, right? And making sure that it's part of our common conversation when we talk about healthcare and reproductive healthcare. Abortion care is just one part of that. And we need it all to go together for healthy mamas and babies. Changing the conversation.
So I just wanted to share with you also, Assemblywoman, we got a comment from the audience, which I think is really, because I mean, you've all said such important and memorable things here, but one of the members of our audience said, I love Chair Monroe-Moreno's point about if they can take away this right, they can take away any of our other rights as well. We need to be saying this more and loudly because many people see this as a niche issue. something that doesn't affect them personally. And you've done a very good job of expanding it to every single issue that people say they care about. So that is really essential. And I wanted to also tell you all, and I think this is really a question for us at Women for Biden-Harris. Somebody said, can the panel share how to follow them on social media? Because you now have a huge number of fans out there who want to be sure. So I'm assuming that I can say to my colleagues who are back in the background here, that we will make that information available, assuming you want to share that with us. Now, I'm imagining that that Dr. Feisullin might be a little bit more reticent to be so public. I'm not sure. But I know Heather has a huge social media presence, and I am sure that you do too, Assemblywoman. So but whatever you want to share with us that will help our audience follow you all, we'd love to put that out in all of our own social media. And we do have our social media, we have our website, and we have all of our various platforms. So I think that is pretty much, you've done an incredible wrap up of the call to action, which is really what we're here for, because we are trying to make everybody understand why this needs to be the number one or number two issue in the lives of every American voter who is deciding which person they want, which people they want to be in the White House. And we have to do a lot. We have to spend time that we don't have. We have to go places we might not want to go. We have to really throw ourselves in there. I mean, as Heather said about what the question was that she was asked about the civil rights movement, is this an issue that you would be willing to die for? And there will be women dying because of this issue. And those women and what's going on in their lives have enormous, the effects of their suffering and their healthcare issues and their economic decisions and personal decisions reverberate around everybody whose lives are touched by those women. So this is why, that the issue of understanding that this affects all of us is really, really a critical issue. And so to talk a little bit more about how we're going to, actually engage in action that all of you can participate in, and you're going to feel better and stronger and more powerful and more impactful if you listen to Audrey Finchie, who's going to tell you about our summer of action on reproductive rights. Audrey?
Thank you, Linda. Well, first, a very sincere thank you to our distinguished panelists and moderator, our co-hosts, and all of you taking time on your Sunday to join this important conversation. Today's call kicks off our summer of action with what we're calling the Stay in the Know series. The goal of this series is to provide you with information that you can trust on the key issues that matter to you and to all women in the upcoming election, issues such as reproductive freedom. The Women for Biden-Harris team has designed the Stay in the Know programs and content to draw a stark contrast between what Donald Trump says he will do if elected and what President Biden and Vice President Harris will continue to deliver for the American people. As you can see on your screen, we have developed a reproductive freedom toolkit to go along with today's discussion. This toolkit provides what you need to host a fact-sharing event or gathering with your friends and loved ones. This could be a house party, a meetup, or even a one-on-one conversation. The kit offers tips on preparing and hosting an engaging event. It includes a discussion guide, talking points, and a compare and contrast fact sheet. The toolkit is available now at the womenforbidenharris.com website under the Resources tab, and a link to the toolkit will also be provided in our weekly newsletter coming out on Thursday. Throughout the summer, we will continue to host events and provide toolkits on other important issues, such as gun safety, Social Security and Medicare, the economy and taxes, and climate change. It's critical that we bring large numbers of new members into these important conversations ahead of the upcoming election. In closing, I encourage you to share the facts about reproductive freedom with the women in your lives. Consider hosting a house party or a social gathering. Recruit women to visit our website and sign up for any number of mobilization activities offered in our newsletter. There are just 153 days left until the election, and your involvement and your outreach to other women truly makes a difference. Thank you all for joining the call, and I'll hand it back to you, Linda.
Well, thank you very much. And this is a terrific toolkit, very, very helpful. Certainly, there are many, many places to share the information that you are going to be getting from the toolkit, and also the information that you've heard from our panelists today. You are at lunch with friends, you are having a family dinner. You certainly want to talk to all the women in your lives and in your circle who are of childbearing age. You know, we are certainly hearing that young voters are not motivated like they should be to understand the stakes for voting. Not only have President Biden and Vice President Harris been a great team in the White House, and they've done so much for America already, you know, both economically and in terms of every form of justice. And there are so many things left to do that they are trying mightily to get done, being resisted by, you know, at every corner by Republicans, which is why we need to get them in the minority in the Senate. We need to get them in the minority in the House. We need to, you know, to clear the way for President Biden and Vice President Harris to do on behalf of the American people, on behalf of working people, on behalf of the shrinking middle class, on behalf of families and individuals, all the things they want to do to create a more just and fair society. You know, we have to get all the bad actors out of the, you know, we have to rip the reins of power out of their hands. And so I not only urge you to get your hands on the Reproductive Freedom Toolkit and really digest it and share it with everybody, but also this webinar will be available. And you've heard amazing insights, warnings, and calls to action and words of inspiration from our panelists. So please send this link around too to your friends. I mean, urge your friends to take some time, or your skeptical friends especially, sit down and listen to what our panelists had to tell you today. And I think that you will find that you're starting to have the very impact that you want to have as a volunteer in our proud organization, and one that we hope you will help us grow. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We want to thank effusively our panelists who were just incredible. And the team at Women for Biden-Harris, thank you so much. And we will see you the next time that we do one of these events.
Talk to the men too, not just the women.
Yes, and the men. That's right. Very good point. Very good point.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Really
you.
appreciate the other panelists. You all were terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. You're
Women
so
for Biden
inspiring.
Harris.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.